I'm Timmery, and I'm here with Taylor Udell, Product Marketing Manager at Heap. So Taylor, what do you see as the next data trends for 2019?
So I think there are a couple of data trends depending on where companies are as an organization. First, there's the move to cloud infrastructure. This isn't something that's necessarily new, but we're also seeing a lot more companies adopt this strategy. Even larger enterprise companies are really moving to a cloud-based system. For people who are in the cloud, a lot of them are moving to multi-tenant infrastructures, like something like Snowflake, which is fully managed. So you can really reduce the amount of resources you're using when maintaining your own infrastructure. And the last kind of trend we're seeing in the market is a lot more movement towards real-time architecture. So people are using event streaming platforms like Kafka, Kinesis to power data products within their companies.
And how does Heap fit in with all of this?
If you think about data, the most advanced companies are treating data as a product. This means that they have a constant team devoted to actually building, maintaining models, and also making sure that any visualizations, any insights, any integrations with other tools within their ecosystems are all powered by a clean, trustworthy source of data. Because data is treated as a product, there's a bunch of components that are more or less required. So if you think about product management, like requirements are a huge part of making sure that the data fits the business use cases. Then there's also other things like having an audit trail or something like a repo where you can manage change and you actually have governance features. The actual models are going to be iterating as your questions evolve and also as your sophistication enhances. So being able to actually adapt the architecture or adapt the models that your data is stored in is a really key component to making sure that your business or your data strategy can evolve as you grow as a business, and also can continue to be that competitive edge.
What kind of problems do teams run into when they're trying to use data as a product?
So I think a lot of the problems actually stem from viewing data as a product is not fully adopted by the market yet. This is something that sophisticated companies are, but not necessarily every single company has adopted this strategy. And I think that's just because bringing data-driven cultures is still relatively new. Everyone knows they need to be data-driven. I don't think you'll have a lot of people telling you, oh, we're not trying to do something or we don't have
We're
data.
driven on our intuition, like as a company. Yeah, that's not something that people say.
The market trends are clear. If you still look at like data scientists, data engineers, those are some of the fastest growing roles. And I think that's indicative of the fact that people are still trying to figure out how data fits into their strategy. And so a lot of the problems come up with the infrastructure is constantly changing, so there's too much maintenance costs. The types of data they actually feel like including or they need to include in their business model changes. The teams that they're supporting are even changing. Not just marketers need data, like the product team, which is a new field, really needs data. Customer success needs data. And then data also probably is beginning to power a lot of people's products. If you think about recommendation engines, if you think about even how Lyft or Uber is actually connecting you with efficient rides, these are all data problems that are evolving with data teams, and more companies are going to adopt data as a core differentiator in their strategies.
And I would imagine that those teams would definitely need the same type of data, right? I feel like a lot of teams have these silo tools that they're using, and then they get different numbers and make decisions, but then don't share that data across functions.
That's exactly right. So another big problem is how do I get all of these different data into the same place so I can create a comprehensive view with standardized definitions. I can't imagine how many companies have meetings where marketing walks in with a number that's different from the data teams, which is different from the product teams, and it's all supposed to be the same metric. So really, especially because data kind of evolves separately across different orgs. You have a product analytics tool, you have a marketing analytics tool, you have your infrastructure and your service logs, and operational data and finance data, and it's all kind of existing in this ecosystem that has a bunch of barriers. And one large initiative, and a lot of the data teams we've actually talked to, their goal for 2019 is really making sure all of that data exists in the exact same place.
And what kind of place is this?
So that has depended, and this kind of goes to that cloud trend. Some customers are using an on-prem data lake, something like Hadoop. A lot of customers are moving to data lakes in the cloud, or they're using S3 or storage. through like AWS. A lot of companies are actually moving to data warehouses, so something like a Snowflake, Redshift, BigQuery. So it really just depends.
Mm-hmm. And I keep hearing this term customer data platform. Can you talk more about that?
Sure. So a customer data platform is something that is very MarTech-y, very jargony. And what we've actually seen is it's a centralized hub for where all of the information about your customers live, that allows you to take action or power really personalized flows, so that your customer has a better experience. If you think about the customer experience today, and I'm sure all of us have, shopped online at this point, people really expect a cohesive experience across all of their different channels. So I expect my in-store experience to actually impact what I'm seeing on the website, to actually impact the type of emails I get.
For sure.
To the point where it doesn't feel creepy, but it actually feels helpful. A lot of people have said that they opt into ads, for example, that are personalized.
They want that seamless experience, and they want their lives to be easier.
Exactly. And the biggest barrier to that is making sure you understand what's actually going on in all of these different places. So that's what the customer data platform is supposed to be.
Mm-hmm. And I keep hearing also about this build your own customer data platform. Like, why should companies build their own customer data platform versus buy one?
This really speaks to where you are in terms of your data strategy. A lot of kind of SMB mid-market companies who maybe haven't had the time or resources or didn't start out data first haven't actually been able to build out an entire infrastructure to support initiatives like these. But what we see in the enterprise space especially is that one, no tool actually has a complete set of data or can collect all the sources of data.
Small detail.
So it's like a key lever. If you're a finance company, something like credit bureau information is probably really important to dictating how you're actually going to personalize, direct mail campaigns or email strategies. And that also might be something that you can't put into a third-party tool because of PII and the tightening from GDPR and other types of legislation.
Yes, there's been a lot of big news with all of that this year. Yeah.
So I guess data privacy is a trend I missed out on earlier, but that's a really growing, important factor in actually building your own architecture. So because of privacy concerns, because third-party tools don't have all the data, and also because a lot of companies are moving in-house with identity resolution to actually complete that picture of a user, we find that they're able to do more with an in-house data team, and they can also build better, more predictive segments in something like a data warehouse than they can with a third-party tool. It kind of eliminates that black box so they can really use data as their core advantage versus using a prescribed methodology.
For sure. And I would imagine that each company would have this unique competitive advantage, so that way they can grow the business and improve in the way that they need to.
Exactly.
So how does Heap solve these data problems?
So Heap is really innovative in the way it has actually approached handling data altogether. So if you think about the major problems stemming from how people don't treat data as a product, Heap is a tool that really empowers data teams to think of data as a product. Because we're first of all, Heap automates away a lot of error-prone components of actually collecting data. So auto capture ensures that you have that complete data set because it's ingesting everything without actually having to implement tracking code. And anytime you have to implement tracking code, there's things like typos or changing in naming conventions that really actually break the data downstream.
And that saves a lot of time also. Tagging takes forever, and then you also it takes a long time to actually get those insights.
Yeah, so it's a huge component is data access, because you have a complete set of data and you also haven't had to use weeks and months of engineering time in order to actually collect that data. But then Heap's, I guess, special sauce, for lack of a better word, is really the virtualization layer on top of this raw data. And right now, what Heap is actually collecting is customer behavior. So online clicks, form changes, page views, if you think about the app, tap swipes, really click-ins. We have some email integrations where we're capturing email sends, email opens. And we actually have this virtualization layer that we apply on top of the data. And that allows you to iterate on how you want a set of behaviors to be named, or what sets of behaviors you even want to include in a definition. So as your questions change, you have the ability to scale and shape your data without having to remodel the data downstream, without getting breaks in the data because there's pieces of data that are missing because you didn't collect it, or your name changed and now you have to do a bunch of joins in order to actually clean the data. It really just helps you standardize that schema, iterate on it, and get that complete set of data to answer all of your questions.
So in other words, if I'm looking at this as like my company's using this virtualization feature, so basically I would name different aspects, like different functions on the site, interactions, and then that wouldn't change the data itself. And then if I wanted to change my mind in a month or something, my boss says, hey, we want to do it this way, I can change that and the data's still there.
Yeah, and I would say, if you think about like a website or like e-commerce, financial services, they're constantly iterating their product. That's how people get better products. That's how you improve the customer experience. And if you think about traditional tools, every time you make a change, like you have to think about all of the questions you had. How do I keep this consistent across time? And especially when there's a component of the customer experience that is so variable, that is so changing, it's really important to have an iterative tool on top of it. So, say, I only had one add to cart button and now I have 5. I can include them all with virtualization under the same name or the same type of behavior. I can label them the same, and I'll have that complete retroactive set of data so I can really monitor a continuous flow as my site and my experience evolves.
That's cool. I remember myself being on a marketing team. We'd create a web page, and then 2 weeks later we would want to change the web page completely. So this would be super helpful if we had that.
Exactly.
That's cool. So also talk to me about customer data as a service.
Yeah. So essentially, if you're thinking about this build your own CDP movement, a key component of that is user behavior. Behavior is a really great source to actually predict what types of customers are going to have higher LTV, or who's going to need a specific type of email or personalization campaign, because you can actually understand everything they did, and you can get a lot more granular than you can with how does a person actually browse in my store. At least for the time being. We'll see what happens with video surveillance in stores, but that's for another time. But because this customer behavior online and app is so important to the actual customer experience, Heap has really set out to make sure that it's easy to incorporate this into your warehouse or your data lake or wherever you store your source of truth to really power your customer's experience.
For sure.
So what customer data as a service is the automated collection of data. It is the virtualization layer to make sure that the data is clean and easy to use. It also includes components that are identity resolution, data governance to make sure everything is trustworthy, and also a normalized schema, making it easy to integrate with other sources. And then all of this data that's captured and organized is actually piped to your data lake, data warehouse, so that you can actually join it with all of your other sources and build your own CDP.
Oh, wow. So then you have all of these different insights and get a really comprehensive view of the customer.
Exactly. Our goal is to really empower customers, or our customers at least, with this complete view of their customers so that they can really ensure that their customers are having the best experience possible, so that they can drive repeat business and really create that relationship, that personalized relationship with their customers.
So what's the difference between data as a product and customer data as a service?
So data as a product is really a mindset and approach to working with data. So if you think about it, it's a set of processes, a set of resources, mostly people actually devoted to maintaining data as a tool for your company to use. Customer data as a service is the best way to incorporate customer data into your data products that you're producing for your company. And what I mean by data products, it could be a bunch of different things. It could be machine learning models. It could be visualizations that power the company. It could be segmentation that actually branches out and pipes data to other tools that your marketing team might be using, like an email service provider. customer data as a service is a tool that people who view data as a product are using in order to really power their systems and get the data that they need to actually drive a more usable data product for their company.
Got it. How does a company know if they're ready for customer data as a service?
That's a great question. And we work with a lot of people across kind of the maturity curve. I think it really comes when you're ready to start putting data in a warehouse or in a data lake. So usually the correct time is when you have 1 to 3 data employees who are actually dedicated to building out data products to power your teams. That's when you start to do the research to really look for something like customer data as a service, because that's when you have the resources to actually build something.
Right, in order to build something, you need the resources and the tools, for sure.
I think it's really important for companies to keep in mind that, what is their end goal? What outcomes are they trying to drive using data? Because there's plenty of stops along the way. A lot of our customers started with optimizing like the conversion flow, then optimizing retention, and now have moved to this kind of holistic view of like, how can I actually personalize this customer's experience? How can I make them feel like a partner in my business rather than just someone who I'm peppering with emails or ads or whatever it might be.
You can't go from like crawling to running like all in one step. It's definitely a process.
And what we see too is like people hit different points on the maturity curve before they're ready to move on to the next step. So you might be 100% confident in your ability to like measure like counts, for example, but only like 70% confident that your funnel is optimized and still be ready for a warehouse. It's just really what's the makeup of your company.
So going back to customer data as a service, you were talking about companies that can start this process. You have data teams that are 1 to 3 people. Does it matter if these data teams are consolidated or distributed?
It really depends, because I worked with companies who have had this initiative who are structured into like both ways. I think usually we see that the people who are taking on these initiatives actually have a centralized data team because they're trying to build a data strategy in their company, which is really hard to do if your data team sits in a bunch of different places.
For sure.
But that said, there's always exceptions that prove the rule.
Do you have advice for anyone who's getting started with Heap?
Yeah. I think that Heap is a really powerful tool, but we're happy to meet you kind of like where you're at. I would say the thing that I think is most important is really thinking about the business outcomes that you want to drive first. And from there, thinking about the types of questions that you have, how can you impact that business metric? And I think you should use that as your guide to really planning what you want to look at in the tool. I think because Heap is so powerful that sometimes it feels a little bit hard to get started, but the real power really lies in Heap's ability to iterate. So if you start with one question, you can always go down a rabbit hole later, but really make sure that all the questions you're asking are to directly impact a business metric, not just asking questions for question's sake because you can. Even though that's sometimes a really fun thing to do, especially because you're
like a rabbit hole
to.
For sure.
Yeah.
Can you give an example of a company that's really seen a lot of value from using Heap?
Yeah. I think that, one of the companies that has been at least really great to work with on our end has been OppLoans. They have really evolved their data strategy in our time partnering with them. But they have found a bunch of very impressive optimizations that have really impacted the amount of revenue multiple channels are able to contribute to their bottom line. Through using the retroactive auto capture, virtualization, they're really able to pinpoint friction points in their process and really improve that experience for their customers.
Really great that you can tie data to actual revenue and ROI. Thanks, Taylor. This has been really great.
It's really great talking with you guys as well.